Hello and welcome to The Last Word, the podcast from Ordinary Hero, where we delve into the stories behind the headlines, the passion behind the professionals, and the people who've truly made their mark. Today we're joined by Michael Bentwood, former Formula 3 champion, now a driving consultant and technical driver with a serious love for life in the fast lane. From high-octane days on the track to navigating quieter, greener roads of electric vehicles, Michael shares his thoughts on the future of driving, the thrill that never quite leaves the system, and what it means to adapt without losing your edge. It's an honest, insightful, and at times surprising conversation, so buckle up and let's get the last word. So Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here. First question to kick us off, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, apart from my 1-year-old child, raising standards and being better. I think if I can help people understand cars better and all the technology that goes with it, then that's kind of what motivates me.
And so in terms of obviously doing that, talk to me about the hurdles you've had with the electric evolution. And has there been? It might have been swimmingly well, but equally it might not have been. So tell me about electrification.
Well, I guess we should probably start with hybrids because, of course, I felt the car manufacturers were trying to introduce us to the whole thing slowly. And there's been a number of hybrids around longer than others. But I remember in the early days that some Porsche owners were bringing their hybrids back because they got a better overall MPG with the diesels. And I think people didn't realise, or motorists didn't realise, that once you've used up the charge in the battery, whatever that might be, 30 miles, 60 miles, you're then carrying that excess weight in the vehicle that negatively impacts your MPG. So then when we moved to full electrification, I think in some ways that was easier for people to understand. But in my head, as a youngster, I always thought about electrification with a golf buggy, getting to the 18th hole quicker. You know, there were these tiny little machines that did lots of stop-start work, and they were tiny, and the milk flow was no different, was it? And it was really quiet, never disturbed anyone at 6 o'clock in the morning. So in my head, I couldn't imagine a mass market or a passenger car on the road that has to go through all this legislation, crash testing. I just couldn't see it happening, but of course it has now. And really, I think to answer your question, there's all sorts of curveballs I've seen. I remember coming back with my wife from Beverley, and we saw all these Teslas that had pulled into the service station. I thought, oh wow, how cool, loads of Teslas. And in my innocence, I thought, oh, they're obviously on a bit of a convoy drive. And of course they weren't. They were all queuing for superchargers that were already taken by the Teslas that were already there. I thought, wow, so not only are they going to have to wait to get their supercharger, they've got to wait to then charge the car. Having said that, I've driven some amazing electric cars. I think the BMW i4 is a pretty good product, rides well, quite a nice chassis, lovely and quiet, and straightforward to use. But I think the majority of people, because of the lack of understanding around the cars and the infrastructure that everyone doesn't seem to think we do have or don't have, it's a bit of an issue them making that decision. And the big thing I've been reading about really is the purchase price. So I'm not sure. I feel like the whole car market's in a bit of a rush really. Maybe we should have stuck to the hybrids for a bit longer. People were more comfortable with those. They could dip in and out of electrification and petrol, and it worked quite well. Maybe we're all in a bit of a rush to go fully electric.
And do you think, going back to the Teslas and the queue, in the services, it certainly puts me off from going electric. Do you think that's the main sticking point?
Yeah, I think motoring has to be practical. I can fill my car up now using an app at a petrol station in less than 90 seconds, and I'm back on the road. So who wants to have to wait for that length of time? I'm sure if you're quite organised, you can have charging at home. I know a guy that had to sell his electric car because he couldn't get a charging port at home because he lived in an apartment. I know a guy that I go to the pub with, he took his electric car skiing, and of course when he went up the hills, steep hills, of course there was higher deg on the battery. Fair enough, he recouped some of that back on the way down, but he couldn't believe in the cold temperatures below minus 4 and 5. He'd park the car up with 130 miles and come back to it and it'd have 89, 90.
Yeah.
So I think there's loads of pros and cons, but I think in a lifestyle or society where and it's only my personal opinion, we're all becoming more time poor, you want to be able to do things reasonably swiftly, which means refilling your car or recharging your car. But I think it's not always the same answer for everyone. I mean, clearly there's a lot more petrol stations than there are charging stations in England. But I think the key word is practical. They're not always as practical as people think. And just little things. I was reading an article in the paper that everyone's waiting for solid state batteries. Oh, we'll get more range. They'll be cheaper to buy. But BMW were saying that lithium ion is definitely not dead. And there's no rush for solid state batteries because they will just raise the price of the purchase cost, and they're already expensive, which is another factor. The depreciation on some electric vehicles has been pretty frightening, which is another reason to put people off. At least we know that combustion cars, they're more of a known quantity. But BMW was saying there's plenty of life in lithium ion. They have discovered that mixing 3 materials, I think it was nickel, manganese and cobalt, they can now produce a battery that is not only smaller, it's cheaper to produce and offers a much bigger range. So not only will that be more attractive to buyers, it means that they will be able to package it easier in the car. And I'm probably slightly biased in a way because I'm a massive petrol head, but every time I'm following an electric car, I can see some of them, not all manufacturers, but they've obviously bolted this huge battery to the floor. And I think, crikey, if they catch a sleeping policeman at the wrong angle, they'll just rip a hole or rip the battery off.
Yeah. And
I heard a story about someone that owned a Volvo. They did exactly that. There was some subsidence in the tarmac. They had all their family in the car. It caught this, I don't think it was a sleeping policeman, but like a curb strike. And the insurance company sent out an engineer to have a look at this battery. And they said, oh, it's £15,000 to replace the battery. So the insurance company just wrote the car off.
Gosh.
And the owner went back to a combustion car.
Wow.
So it's all so new. When you think the combustion engine's been around for 50, 60 years, we've evolved that to perfection almost. And I think that's what I mean. I feel like we're all in a bit of a rush. What maybe works on paper doesn't necessarily work in the real world.
And as a professional driver, how do you feel about the drive experience of driving electric versus ICE?
So ICE cars, I feel they've been honed and evolved for many years. And taking performance cars as an example, maybe a BMW M3, if you get underneath one of those, all the strengthening and strut braces, they fit to those road cars to give them a really good stiff chassis and make them exciting to drive. I mean, as a starter, you can't do that with some electric cars because you've got this great big battery in the way. If you take a GT3 RS, the aerodynamics underneath that car are just a work of art. And that gives it this ultimate unique performance level that's really special, but it's a really difficult to achieve that with electric cars at the moment, really because of the packaging. They obviously want to put the electric battery nice and low, out of the way, and underneath the rear seats or in the floor plan is usually the most logical place to put it. But they think as batteries evolve, they'll be able to fit them better, and they'll have less of an effect on the dynamics. I've driven a number of electric cars, and I don't feel that anything like as good dynamically. Okay, the Porsche Taycan is probably a really impressive dynamic car, but it's still nothing like their ICE equivalents. Definitely not. If you're asking me what would I rather drive, I'd much rather drive a combustion car for the emotion alone.
The emotion. So is it okay? So that equal with handling, or?
Well, both equally important. I saw some guy saying, you know, who'd want a GT3 RS? They're so slow in a straight line compared to a McLaren and a Ferrari. But for me, it's the execution. It's the way it does these things, the way it corners. That's how I want to feel an intrinsic part of the machine. And I'm not necessarily that interested in going that fast in a straight line. So I was probably the opposite to this particular gent. But I think that's really difficult to achieve in an electric car. But it's not everyone's priority.
No, but I think it's a really big part. You know, you think about the iconic sort of, particularly the small cars, the small hatch cars that are sort of, you know, people buy them because they're fun to drive, and they're fun to drive when they're being put through the gears and all of that kind of stuff. And it is a different driving experience, and I think that's the interesting part of it.
But also, it's that fake noise, isn't it? I mean, you know, a lot of these hybrids have that fake, and you're thinking, well, I want that for real.
I know.
You know, I think going back to that emotion, you do. You know, you can't hear them. And I've got an 11-year-old. He's a petrol head, and he wants to hear them. He doesn't want to hear silence. And you know, like you say, it's an emotional thing. So talk to me then about what electric has done for events.
Is that good and bad?
That's a good and bad.
That's a good question. Another good question.
Do you get asked a lot? Find me a venue, or we get asked a lot, and then we ask if you know any as well. Find us a venue that have got 37 charging points.
Yeah.
All for speed charging, and all included in the price for the hire. Those sorts of things. Yeah.
Bring down the whole local grid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I've only done, I mean, we're quite late to the party compared to you guys. I think you've done a lot more electrification events, if you like. But I remember a certain manufacturer, one of their car launches, and of course the venue couldn't provide adequate charging or an infrastructure. And they had generators behind the toilets driving charging, and I think, if my memory serves me correctly, these generators were diesel. So it made a whole mockery of the whole thing.
But that's the kind of reality of electric events.
Yeah.
I mean, the best you can do is biodiesel, which is what you know we aim to do if we can't do it any other way, because that is, as you say, that's the reality. So it's a real challenge to kind of balance those two things.
Yeah.
Well, for the client and obviously for the experience of the guest as well. But they usually shove behind the toilet block for that reason, so they can't see it.
Yeah.
But there's no other way of balancing the two.
But also, Heather, from an expense point of view and a client's point of view, you have to buy, you know, if it's not there in its infrastructure in terms of a hotel venue, you have to buy that in, and it's not a cheap thing, is it?
No, definitely not. And also, you know, when we were looking at that press launch, it wasn't press launch actually, was it? No, it was press launch, wasn't it? The one out in Spain and Portugal. And we had to balance up that infrastructure versus the drive routes, versus the accessibility of all the pan-European guests coming into those locations. It's got to be, you know, it's part of the mix. It's not just a standalone. And I think we've said it many times, haven't we? If we all had a few million, we'd buy a venue, We'd put 1 million charging points in there. We'd have it as a hub for all air routes coming in and out, and have a fantastic drive route around the corner. But it just doesn't exist. And I think we've all experienced that to a lesser or greater extent, haven't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you guys work in tandem a lot in terms of sharing your knowledge, sharing your expertise, and, you know, really, I guess we have creative briefs from our clients, but we also have to be practical and sensible because, you know, that sometimes doesn't work for the end user. So how do you then work together to find the A, the B roads, the perfect venue for press, media? How do you guys work together with that?
So I think when we're first looking at a brief from a client, often it'll have a number of clear sort of directives within there. It'll be access for audience, and that has to be one of the key things. The profile of the product we're either launching or training on, or whichever type of event it is, will then drive what driving routes we're going to need to resource, find, build in some cases. And sometimes they'll be multifaceted, won't they? There'll be, you know, a bit of urban, bit of highway, a bit of, you know, something a bit more sort of dynamic, perhaps off-roading. So they're sort of the fundamentals. And then you've got to find the magic property that's just the right size, a bit like the porridge pots and all that. So it's got to be just the right size for the size of group. Ideally, it's somewhere where no one's been before, which of course is slightly more challenging again. So by the time you've got all of this into a mix, and you know, we'll have several discussions along those lines as well. We'll talk to not just the drive team, but to the logistics team about the accessibility. We'll look at flight rationales, that sort of stuff as well. And then, of course, it's all got to fit within the finite budget, because the budget is part of the brief. There's no point in coming up with a fantastic solution that's 3 times the budget. Yeah. So that's a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
Very much so. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, where do you enjoy operating as a sort of drive team? Where do you find it most versatile for which country or which city or which location?
Well, definitely not city centres. I mean, countryside is always, I think, best for us, because depending on what you're trying to demonstrate on the car, you can generally find suitable roads to do that. We'd often do a recce, of course, make sure there's no roadworks and potholes that can catch you out, especially in England. But and of course, Europe's always a good place, because I often feel things are better in the sunshine. And in some cases, we'll want to be at a racetrack, because these cars are getting so powerful now that the only place you can properly demonstrate some of the key attributes are on a racetrack, which is consistent and safe away from the public.
And safety is a really key feature. I think it's a really important thing to sort of just talk about, and particularly if you're letting people loose on public roads, because it's much less controllable. And it's something that, you know, is obviously very near to and close to all of our hearts. But how do you as a professional, how do you kind of manage that with the guests that you're sort of responsible for?
So one of the first things I do is which region they're coming from. So often the team from America or Saudi, they're not used to driving on our side of the road, or they're used to the steering wheel on the other side of the car. So we'll often offer to drive them if they feel particularly apprehensive. But of course, they haven't come all that way to be in the passenger seat. We'll usually take them first, and then when they build up some confidence or rapport with the trainer / pro driver, then we'll probably get them in the driving seat, do a bit of a swap and go from there, really. But we'll always find out what level of experience they've got driving wise, and you can quickly ascertain that as well when you meet them and they're in the car. And apart from the obvious things like risk assessments, the big thing is I'll always insist on, from a driving point of view, and my team is we'll always go and recce the route, because things can change so quickly. Roads can be closed, localised flooding. And if we've been given a particular brief, like you get on for example, if we're going to highlight cruise control and lane assist systems, clearly you might want to do that on the motorway. And in my experience, every culture is different. The team from Dubai, some of them had never even used cruise control. So I had to kind of redesign things and maybe simplify things. But equally, if you want to feel the detail in the steering, or maybe a car with anti-roll technologies, you need some winding roads, and of course the countryside's probably best for that.
How aware do you think the clients are about all that goes on behind
the scenes? I think they probably notice more than people realise, which is why it's so important, I think, to have setup days, rehearsals. I often go to some events and think, I'd like another rehearsal or another go out again, really. They must notice things. I remember having some coaching on human behaviour, and people notice more than you probably think.
That's good.
It is good. So, talking about briefs and clients, what would be your ideal brief and why?
Oh my gosh, ideal brief. Open checkbook, any country, any racetrack.
Which would win out of those?
Yeah.
Well, it depends what you're demonstrating. I think, the racing track has its place, but equally, a lot of these systems now are for the road. So you need to demonstrate them on the road. I think places that have got real character and they offer amazing, support behind the scenes, good food. I love going to a Ascari racetrack because they've got everything there. They've got off-roading, they've got a racetrack, the local...
It's a great circuit.
Great circuit. That Ronda Road, all right, it can be quite dangerous, but it's pretty picturesque and nice to drive. And the food's always very good.
But good for access, right? And again,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
something to think about, isn't it? When clients are giving briefs.
Logistics,
The logistics of it. And I think it's important to sort of highlight, yes, it's nice to go somewhere new and different and no one's been before, but equally you have to think about that end audience, don't you? And if you're looking at press and PR, they've been to everywhere, let's be honest, and they've had the best food and they've had the best treatment, etc. But, and
it's got to work.
It's got to work. It's got to be practical.
I mean, we know a project at the moment that is a challenge to get to because it's the flight access isn't there. A lot of these programs, as we know, will run either 1 or 2 night program. So we might be able to get them there, but we can't get them home again. So what should be a 1 or 2 night program is suddenly a 4 night program. Well, that's that's double the cost. That's double the time out of the business. That's double everything. And that's when you get into sort of chartering flights and all that sort of stuff. And when we come to the table with a solution, it's thought through for that reason. It comes in with all that background done on not only the drive routes, but the fact we can get them there and back, within the parameters of what we're trying to achieve. Ideally without a dog.
You're going to be Auntie Nikki in a minute.
You are.
Auntie Nikki, where is she?
She's hiding because she was coughing. Sit down.
So, same question to you then. What would be your ideal brief and why? I know it's a bit of moon on a stick, maybe, but
I think I always see the budget as a really key part of the brief, and I think this is sometimes quite a difficult conversation to be had because a client will have a really clear vision of what they want, which is fantastic, but sometimes it's not quite within the budget that they've allocated, and that it could have all different elements. It might have multi nights, different sort of elements to it. It might have a drive program, might have a dinner or an activity. It could have all sorts of things. But if the budget doesn't support it, then actually it's, it can be quite challenging to have those sorts of conversations. So in answer to your question, my ideal brief is to have a clear set of outcomes and a budget, and then our job is to come back with the best bang for that buck, basically. It's what we think as a group of professionals, whichever elements that takes in, you know, we can then come back and say, okay, within your budget sphere, this is what we think is the best spend of that budget. And actually, we've done your shopping list as well, because we like a shopping list. We think it's good because often you can find a few extra pounds down the back of the sofa, or there might become budget available from other areas. So if we give you a shopping list as well, then you've got things that you can go, okay, well, if we can find this much money, we can have this as well. So I think that's really key for us.
So, Michael, why do you do what you do? You've come obviously from a racing background, and you've naturally gone into the course of where you are now. So tell us, why do you do what you do?
Well, another good question. I think it was still, it's difficult as a professional racing driver, like any professional sportsman. Where do you go? What do you do? And I think that it was still meant what I do now is it's still in cars. I'm still passionate about the cars, if you like. It was reasonably close to the industry, or I'm still in the industry, if you like. But one key factor that I felt was quite similar was when you're racing, you're always talking about these tiny details and incremental gains, and you hear the professional cyclists talk about it, or the Formula One drivers, the tiny details to give you that 0.2 of a second in qualifying or whatever you're looking for. And I think that can be applied to driving events. What little things can we do to give the customer an easier journey, or make life easier for you guys, the operators? And I've looked at everything really with my team, from clothing to even asking them to get their hair cut before an event. And I'm just kind of trying to raise the bar, and that's very much like racing, whether you're looking at your personal fitness, more out of the racing car itself, or your own personal performance. So I think that's what's kept me going. It's kind of evolved. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm working at DHL as a logistics manager with drivers in Europe or drivers in England. But the reality is we're just trying to be better and deliver something that's really memorable and special. And I just always remind myself and the team, how can we be better, and are we fulfilling the brief? You know, there's no point going around a racetrack if we're trying to demonstrate cruise control and lane assist. Yeah. So I think in answer to your question, it can be kind of applied. I think that's how I've looked at it. And definitely the training, or my discipline, being schooled in racing's really helped me here to be disciplined with budgets, with clothing, and what's right, and adapting. I can't believe when I travelled to East Asia how different all the cultures were. It was just mind-blowing for me. What's important to their market isn't necessarily what's even relevant here. So. And
how long have you been doing what you were doing?
So, crikey, karting from 11, and then all the various racing that followed, and then I've probably been in the driving events business and technical training from about late to mid-20s. So, yeah, at least 20 years, giving my age away now.
The value you add to a client's event, lots of people out there want to possibly, trim down and keep budgets low. But what's the value that you add to their event if they are going to invest? Because you can, there's lots of events team who've got in-house teams, and they maybe think they can go off and do a drive route, etc. But what are you bringing to the party?
I think I have a saying that I feel like I'm paid to think about things or spot things that no one else spots. for example, sure, you can go out and create a road route, but is it in line with what you're trying to demonstrate? And is it, for example, you could find a route that demonstrates the characteristics of the car or a particular piece of equipment on the car, but the rest of the route might be really unflattering to the car, and not really achieve what you're supposed to achieve. I mean, to give you an example, a really granular example, I remember a certain off-roading vehicle coming with these 4 off-roading modes, and one of those modes was called gravel mode. So I said to the team, when we're at Millbrook, let's make sure we drive up the gravel road, and guess what? You can say to customers, pop it in gravel mode. Well, of course, some of the cars arrived without gravel mode.
Oh.
So then we had to think of it differently. But that sort of what I call nerdy detail that they're not even aware of, or some of the my superiors within that manufacturer didn't actually know that that was available on the car. So it's all about how you can paint the picture more thoroughly. So we add more value, and of course, it's the delegate or the customer has a more fulfilling day, really. We'll get the right message across.
I think that's a great example, actually, because we're experts in what we do. That's what we're hired for, and certainly the parameters of our business is to surround ourselves with brilliant people at what they do. They're experts in their own field. We don't profess to be, but we profess to know the right people, and that's where we partner with guys like you. And I think for us, that's the really important thing for clients, is that they've got a day job to do, and this is one part of it, and they're not experts in professional driving or in event management or content production. Their day job is something completely different, and it's our job to support them in those skill sets. So I think that's a really important point, actually. And that's why we do it. Let's be honest. We don't do it for the long hours and the sort of endless sort of demands on the team to do more and more. It's because we're passionate about it, and as you said, it's about the passion and putting that into delivery as well. So
it's not easy.
No. And what have been the biggest wins for you, doing what you do within auto events, not just automotive? So, if you've helped a client, as you just said, we're experts in what we do. So, they might have thought this way, but you have talked them around in doing another way because they're listening to you as the expert. So, biggest wins, have you got any?
Biggest wins, I think how to do things correctly and how not to do things. And the biggest win is I'm always learning. Crikey, I've worked for 13 different brands, and I think I've seen enough now what works well and what doesn't work so well. And just thinking that little bit differently. I think once you've done events so frequently, a lot of the stuff you can just absorb, and you can be quite agile, but at the same time you've got a massive head start when it comes to the next one, as I'm sure you find. Like just a little example, implementing stops for drivers on a road route. Of course they've got to be safe and fairly picturesque, but if you're letting people change within that car, musical chairs, and then they want to experience a car that's in the convoy behind them, then that involves even more stops. But if the manufacturer or the client hasn't done that before, they wouldn't know to implement that. And of course that has a whole bearing on the timetable and various other aspects. So I think you can't replace the experience, because you end up becoming so well educated. And as I say, I never stop learning, whether it's about technology, the vehicles, or the challenges of certain events, as I'm sure you two are very 100%. Familiar with.
100%.
And are you finding that clients are using your expertise? Because obviously some clients are, you know, they're sort of hell-bent in going that way, that's prescriptive and that's what they want to do. But do you find that, you know, with your knowledge and your experience, do they tap into that, or are you finding that they do that?
They do tap into it, but then they don't always tap in enough, because I will often hear something and think, crikey, why wasn't I aware of that sooner? And of course, but in their radar, it wouldn't even be a problem. I mean, an example is braking systems on cars. If you're going to have conventional steel brakes, then that's going to have a big implication on the event. They're not going to last as long. You're going to have to implement cool laps, and of course there's going to be a cost to the business. Whereas if they have ceramic brakes, then there's less implication to the timetable. We can do more laps, so customers are more fulfilled, and guess what, potentially there's less cost to the business. But if they haven't made me aware, then I can't make any suggestions. But what I find is that particular person may not mention it because in their mind or on their radar it's not an issue in the first place, just because it's not their fault, it's just they don't have a technical or engineering background.
And do you think that starts with the briefing stage? You know, if we were involved sooner, do you think that actually might be part and parcel of the conversations around the table? Yeah,
massively. I wish I was involved earlier.
In writing the brief?
With the brief, and even if I was just a fly on the wall, just to, you know, politely say, I'm not sure that would work, or...
have you thought of?
It would impact the day, or just a small change would be massive. But yes, I do feel that often.
And what about you, Heather? Because obviously we all want that magic brief of where we're all involved from the offset. But what do you think? What would you be up for? What was your ideal brief?
I think a few things that work well are, well, there's a number of things in briefing. I'm quite passionate about the briefing thing. I think there's a real benefit of having a core team of suppliers as a client, and then those agencies sharing information rather than always battling against each other. I think there's a massive benefit for everybody on that. Because shared knowledge from a number of different events or projects is massively useful to everybody, and everyone benefits, both financially and with inside knowledge, really, because an agency that's worked on an event over here will then share knowledge with the event people that are doing it the next time, or whatever it may be. So I think that's a real bonus. And I think briefs will then become much more meaningful, because they're not being designed to try and kind of catch people out. They're actually being designed to get the best solution for what it is they're trying to achieve as a project.
And have you ever had that before? Have you?
I have actually. With one manufacturer, there was always a monthly all-agency meeting, which was great. So everybody knew everybody. It was a very sort of level playing field. Everyone was allocated certain projects. Every so often there would be a pitch because it was a big project or whatever it might be. But on the whole, most projects were just allocated because everyone knew what they could do, so it was all fine. But what happened at those all agency meetings each month was there was shared knowledge. So something that had happened, something that had gone before, or something that was up and coming, and everyone could discuss the impact of things that might happen and brainstorm as a group, which was really productive. So I think that's a sort of a great thing to do. It needs a confident client, and it needs agencies that feel secure in their position to be able to do that. But I think that as a benefit is great. And I think particularly with something as challenging as electric, I think that kind of insight and knowledge would be really useful. That's a kind of pipe dream scenario. But yeah, I think that would really add value.
But it's happened before, so it definitely can happen again. Like you say, it's talking about a brave client, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And it's about having a really structured approach to how you allocate work.
And why do you think clients aren't doing that?
I think part of it is there's a sense of, whether it's because people have been burnt before, but there's a sense of clients wanting to protect themselves and always being seen to be buying the most competitive. And sometimes, sadly, experience and creativity and knowledge isn't a tangible thing, perhaps. And therefore, the value associated with that isn't quite so tangible. So it comes down to nuts and bolts, and am I paying more for this nut and this bolt or less? And sometimes that's out of stakeholders' hands and into the hands of procurement. So I think that's a challenge for everybody.
And do you have the procurement? I'm not going to call it an issue, because it's not an issue, because obviously it's a valuable part of a business. But do you come across procurement when you're putting your briefs and your costs together, or is it just a done deal that's part and parcel of the job, as it were?
Another good question.
Do they haggle?
Yeah, I find sometimes, they do haggle. But I often think, crikey, if I'd been part of the brief sooner, then there's lots of other ways to be more cost effective. Yeah. Whether it's booking venues sooner or hotels sooner. But whilst you've got to protect your business and your own intellectual property, I think it's fine. I think as long as I've got a reasonable response. But I guess it can be really competitive, but also what we do is so niche. I think I mentioned it to you a few weeks ago. We're kind of bridging the gap now between technical drivers and technical trainers and pro drivers. So we're kind of wearing both hats. If we're not in the classroom, we're in the car. We might talk about it, but then we've got to go and do it in the car to help them digest it at that level. So I don't think there's that many businesses offering that, but at the same time we've got to be competitive. But
that's a great level of expertise, and that should be recognised.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge. And things are getting more and more expensive, not just for the clients, but for those delivering for the clients as well.
Yeah.
And as you say, a kind of a cohesive combined effort will actually have a much more productive outcome. Definitely. Than necessarily a competitive brief. Yeah. Which is just, people will input, they'll either cut corners or go in low, knowing it will escalate post-event or during the event because they can't deliver based on that budget. And it just becomes a nonsense. Yeah. So I think
it does become a nonsense.
Yeah, I think an agreed rate card is all you can actually physically commit to as an agency. And then outside of that, it comes down to, can I afford the 5-star deluxe property, or is it going to be a 4-star not quite so deluxe property, or are we going to go to Central Europe, or are we going to take 300 people to the south coast of Australia? It's all swings and roundabouts and how long's a piece of string and all that stuff, apart from effectively a rate card. And if, as I say, I go back to this briefing process, that if it's a partnership with your client and or other third-party agencies, and going back to that same client, the agencies work really closely together because it was a united team. And yes, we were competitors in the real world, but for that client, it was a really cohesive approach, and it makes such a difference because you're spending the money where the money should be spent and not just wasting it.
Well, adding huge amounts of value at the same time.
Exactly.
With all of that experience in one room. Yeah. Not only in your niche areas, but also of the past events and past things that have gone on. Yeah. And you're sharing that. So that's a huge benefit.
Definitely.
You just reminded me about the rate card. I'm often asked for a rate card, but that's quite tricky because no one job is ever the same. Yeah. No. For example, we could be travelling, and when we get to the venue, we've got to do not one route, but 2 routes. And then we're customer facing the next day. So the job's always slightly different. Racetrack, is it off-roading? Are we on the road? Are we in the classroom? So sometimes I feel like my rate cards are irrelevant because they are something different every time.
Yeah, it's a really tough thing to do, to get right, definitely.
Where do you see the future of electric?
I'm quite excited about it. I think we're all quite cruel to electric in a way because I think I mentioned before, ICE cars have been around for so many years and we just started on this electrification journey. As we get better packaging and, if you look at Formula One, all their cars are designed around packaging, how skinny can they get the rear bodywork? Can they make the engine smaller, lower? I think, taking an example of Porsche, they've just launched this new 911 GTS. They're doing the whole hybridization in a really sensitive way. I think it's really clever. Gone are the days where we just whack some batteries under the rear seat and call it a hybrid and it's a load of Duracells in a row. What Porsche have done with the 911 I think is incredible. They are generating 11 kilowatts of energy from the exhaust gases alone. They've put an electric motor inside the gearbox. The hybrid system only weighs 50 kilos and because of the packaging they've been able to put the engine in lower. I mean, it's just win, 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 win. And they've made probably one of the most compelling hybrid road cars to date. The performance is bonkers. That sort of stuff really excites me. But I think there's a lot of early cars out there that were quite crude and, kind of rush it to market job. But I think as the battery technology evolves, as certain manufacturers get the mixture of chemicals right, we can produce smaller batteries, easier to make, lighter, bigger range, and of course that will drive the cost down. And then it'll make it more attractive to people like me. The biggest problem for me is the cost of electric cars.
Yep.
One I want is not affordable, and I'm not prepared to spend. I haven't got the time to sit somewhere in a car waiting for it to charge. I don't care how fast it charges. And people laugh at me because I can fuel my combustion car in 90 seconds on the phone with the app. I don't even have to go in. And they go, "Oh, how do you do that?" And I say, well, it's all, once you've set it up on Apple Pay or Android Pay, done. You get the PDF receipt on email and send it to the accountant if necessary. The cashier gets notification. The best bit is they all think I've stolen the fuel. Clearly I haven't. But, my understanding for hybrids and electric cars, they were really designed for a specific type of driving style. Stop, start in city centres, and that's where they're at their best. They're not at their best around a racetrack, of course, but are they at their best on the motorway once you've run out of that battery charge? Probably not. But full electrification, I think once we produce a car with a range of over 500 miles that is competitive to the ICE cars, and we can charge it within a reasonable time frame, and it's more practical, then I think we'll all have more motivation to buy them.
And so when you're doing the events and when we're working together, obviously you've got a lot of dealers in, but you might have, other events where you've got people like me who are just off the street and you're part and parcel of the drive team. What's the question that are on people, what people are asking you, not necessarily about the car, but the whole electrification movement?
So a lot of my close friends, family, and a lot of the manufacturers I've been working for, they're quite late and apprehensive with electrification, I'd say. But the big question is, for me, I think, what does it cost? People are asking me, what am I going to lose if I buy an electric car? So
you're talking about the residual
values.
Yeah.
I think people, our customers, are more discerning than we're giving them credit for. They'll do research. Of course, they've got the internet, which we didn't have so many years ago. They'll do a lot of research, and they say 80% of people buy a car on the way it looks. Well, I'm not sure that's the case anymore.
No, I'd agree.
But also, for a non-business user or a private consumer, the biggest issue is depreciation. I remember someone saying to me, oh, you can buy this electric car, you can write off part of your corporation tax. But of course, at that time, they were so new. They didn't have a used market. Now we've got a used market and they can't get rid of them. Nobody wants them because they don't know the long-term effects on the batteries. We all see what happens to a mobile phone over 3 or 4 years and this acute battery degradation. I mean, it's very different with a car, but I think...
But they don't know that.
They don't know that.
That's what's not in their mind.
That is the unknown, that's the word.
How well informed do you think the retailers are to educate?
Not well enough.
No.
Not well enough. And I think that's probably what will keep us in business.
Yeah.
And I think they don't get enough time in the vehicles. They possibly don't ask the right questions, and they also don't get given the right information. So...
We talk about dealer, we do a lot of events, and we were talking about, we've got a lovely brief on at the moment, but dealer fatigue. So they're constantly going on events because they need to be educated. It's part and parcel of their role. But then there are some dealers who sort of fight back and go, oh, we don't want to be out of the dealership. But it's all benefiting them because equally, the more genned up and the knowledge they have, the more vehicles they sell, right? So from the training aspects and how Heather Robinson works, what can we do to offer more education without, I guess, interrupting the dealer centre, whatever you want to call it, their programme of events on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think for any retailer or dealer, it's got to always come back to the what's in it for me. And they are there to hit their target. That's the bottom line. Trying to educate them to be able to be more knowledgeable in other aspects that aren't directly going to impact that is quite difficult. And I think when you put in things like fleet into that mix as well, so Bob might come off the street because he's been told he's got to get a company car and he'll want to find out about that company car, but he's not going to sign for it because it's going to come through their main broker at work. There is no incentive for the dealer or retailer to sit down for half an hour and talk through the benefits and challenges of electrification within this particular model that they happen to be looking at. Because at the end of that meeting, he's going to get up and walk out and he's going to achieve nothing to hit his bottom line. So that's the reality in its kind of crudest form. What we can do is try and give the retailer enough ammunition and stories and working knowledge to then be able to make the sales that he has got a direct impact on, so the normal retail sales, quicker and easier by overcoming some of these hurdles that we talked about, general Joe public that they battle with, whether it's range anxiety or cost of residuals and that sort of stuff, to give them that working knowledge to be able to combat those directly.
And what's the benefit of getting people in a room together? Because we know what
for the retailers.
Yeah.
Because I think again they can share knowledge. It's about well, I've got this, well, so have I, and how do you overcome it? And then you can get best practice in from other retailers going, well, this is how we've tackled it. But I think it's also about making sure they have relevant local knowledge. So it's about what's the nearest sort of charging point. If I was going into my retailer in Swansea or something, what is my nearest sort of points of charging points, or where are there sort of, how do I manage all that in a real local sort of way, and focusing on that side of it. So things like that I think can help. If you speak to the manufacturer, they go like, well, people talk about the fire, which is another safety thing with the battery, but actually, you're driving around in a full tank of very flammable fuel, which is a fair point. Yeah. Diesel's different, obviously, but a tank of petrol is a tank of petrol. And the same thing with range anxiety. It used to be, I'm going to run out of petrol, and because is it just a mindset, or is it more than that? Do you think?
For me, it's more. Because I know I've got my backup of my fuel, of my tank.
Because it's a hybrid, though.
Because it's a hybrid.
But do you think, from an electric perspective, do you think it's just a mindset thing? Aside from all the failings of the design, etc., do you think it's a mindset that we're just not familiar with this new?
Partially, yes. I think that's a good point. Electrification's easier because it's just electrification. Hybrids, you've got to think about the batteries' effects on the petrol tank, and it's even more complex. But when I drove this i4, I thought it was quite a nice product, and I used 2% battery all the way there and back, and it was actually quite pleasant. So, yeah, I think there is a mindset. I think if people have not had their bum on the seat, then they probably don't know any different. But I've been lucky enough to drive everything from milk floats to i4s to prototypes. I feel I'm involved more in the performance, or a lot of the manufacturers I work with are kind of late to the party with electrification, which is no bad thing, because there's more chance of getting it right, and they'll hopefully benefit from the battery improvements. But yeah, I do think there's a little bit of that. You know, I just jumped in this car and drove it, and that's it. I had the range on one side, and what I liked was the battery percentage on the other.
Why the big grills? Why do you have to have a grill when you don't actually need a grill if it's an electric
Oh,
vehicle?
well, I've heard stories about that. Do you know?
Because
They're all chasing low drag coefficients. That's why, you know, ultra low slippery aero, really. Because obviously originally they needed grills to cool the radiator, cool the gearbox, and of course the more powerful cars had even more radiators, and they even had, for example, the M3 has a tiny radiator at the bottom of the car to cool the gearbox, because the gearbox
That's interesting to know that.
I didn't know that.
yeah, but of course then they went to grills that are open and close, so they stay closed while the engine warms up to reduce CO2 and help engine warm up phase, and then if it gets too hot they open up. But now they've got these big grills that are often flat or closed, because they're obviously trying to shape the air around the front of the car to get better aero, so it gives you an extra 12-mile range in your electric car.
And then we also have Blackpool illuminations on most of these cars now, so everything lights up. You know, you've got your Porsche Taycan with everything lit up at the back.
Well, they've all got the stripe across the
It's
back
all
now,
the
haven't they?
stripe,
All got
you
the
know,
stripe.
the new
that does
Grand
seem to
Lamb
be
thing.
It's a real
that's got,
trend.
A
the
Porsche
Vauxhall,
signature.
Well, it's on all. Lexus have got it now as well.
Grandland
Yes,
has
they have.
the front, the Vauxhall. So everything's lit up. Like,
Yeah, but I do remember a designer saying very early on in the electric days that it was something. It was because they didn't want to. No one wanted a car without a face, basically.
Interesting.
So, which I thought was quite interesting as well, because there is something about the swear word Tesla that is, it's robotic. It has no personality, even less so now. But because it hasn't got the face.
The face.
So, and also the real design feature, the most beautiful grille, and you know, and all this kind of stuff as well. So I didn't know about I knew about some of the aerodynamic stuff. Didn't know about things like the gearbox and things, which is quite interesting to know any of that.
Well, the only thing is, I suppose BMW is a poor example because their grills have been quite iconic. If you look at their race cars from years and years, early days, decades ago, they had those signature grills, and in fact they were vertical before they were horizontal.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
So I think that's one of their signature design cues.
Exactly.
I'm not sure. I imagine, of course, as well, how we'd all... I noticed car design, they've been quite progressive with it, so we're not too alienated. Maybe if they suddenly remove the grills, we'll all have a heart attack.
I think that's it. I think they're unrecognisable then.
Yeah.
And it's part of it's part of the brand sort of DNA, isn't it, for a lot of them?
But of course, as we go electrification, the aero becomes more important, really.
Yeah. To get that extra mile.
Yeah,
absolutely.
maximise the batteries.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And where do you see obviously we're talking a lot about, you know, your historic manufacturers, your BMWs, your Vauxhalls and your Porsches, etc. But there's other people coming into the market, like Sony, for instance, your BYDs, your Chinese market. So how is that affecting business out there?
So I saw the Sony car. That looks quite interesting to me. And of course, if you have one of those, you're allowed to use the Tesla's superchargers.
Okay. Have you seen one live or on screen?
No, only on screen.
Yeah.
And I thought cost-wise, compared to some of the other brands, and my interpretation of Sony as a brand, they generally do things properly, whether it's televisions, headphones, and hopefully the car. I'm quite looking forward to driving and seeing one of those. But I read that 66% of batteries are made in China now. And the majority, they've just taken over. In fact, recently I saw that they'd overtaken all the other electric manufacturing plants and they'd actually overtaken Tesla. You talking about Tesla. So where do I see it going? I think there'll be a certain segment of electrification cars, BYD, good example, that will be available here in the UK, and I think they'll probably do okay. I think the really sophisticated, more premium ones, we'll have to wait and see. There is, I can't remember his name, but he was recently interviewed. I'm sure it might be Lincoln, but they reckon they produced a car with a 500-mile range, which is fully electric. And he says, I'm not surprised EVs are not selling because most of them suck, was his exact words. And they printed those words in the paper. And he was saying until they get more attractive with the backup of the support, the infrastructure in various countries, that things won't change. The only thing he thought would change in the short term was that as battery technology evolves, production costs come down, hopefully we get more range, it should be more attractive to the end user. So only time will tell. But I think China will be quite a force in the UK with a certain segment of car. And only recently they overtook Tesla in terms of sales and production, I believe.
Well, and also there was a really interesting article that one of our clients posted on LinkedIn actually, which was all around the production of the battery and all the rest of it. And if you look at all the different components, that even though there's battery manufacture in several places, which I wasn't aware of, there's still only certain components that are only made in China. So even if they're not producing all the batteries yet, they're still driving the little manufacture of the little pieces that go into the battery. So it's all driven out of there, whatever.
And we've had recently a couple of briefs in, and actually they've paused because they can't get the vehicles. So we had this issue when COVID came about, and obviously the tail end of COVID was still sort of around maybe 18 months ago. So we still were feeling the force of that. So in terms of the demand, and as the demand goes up, the pressure of delivery, but not only delivery, there's a step before, and obviously the event part of education and driving and doing the press and PR piece. How do you feel that is going? Do you think actually the manufacturers have got it sewn up and they're still, there's not going to be an issue like there was back in the day of COVID?
Wow.
I think it's quite a difficult one, that, because I think there's a number of different forces in place. There's wars going on. There's the import sort of challenges that are happening, and I think there's a whole political landscape that sits outside of all of this as well, which I think is going to impact a whole host of different things. And I don't know enough about where all the bits of manufacture happen to know how that impact directly affects certain things. So it's quite a difficult one to
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's having a bigger, if you think about it, there's more varied components now, I guess. I think we discussed it before, the electric Mini, that's been delayed indefinitely.
Yeah.
Quite scary, really. But yeah, there is a lot more components. But I think there's bigger influences now. And I think all these businesses have got to be so agile to adapt, apart from the political forces, the exchange rates, and I just don't know how some of the manufacturers do it sometimes. I feel sorry for them because, you know, we all think about building a car and choosing your car and insuring it and charging it, but how they even get it to market sometimes is amazing. If it's not crash testing, it's, you know, not enough parts. If it's not parts, it's production issues. It's just bonkers, really.
Yeah.
So training events. So we've had various different training events for different manufacturers. Tell me what the pros are for getting bums on seats and people in a room versus online training.
Face to face as opposed to online.
Yeah.
I think what COVID showed us actually was that you can share information via virtual means, and there's a real place for it. And I think that's a good thing, that it's now a much more hybrid approach to training or any kind of communication actually. But I think what is important around face to face is it's not just about the information share, it becomes much more two-way, and it becomes much more human in its content but also in its interaction. And I think when you're dealing ostensibly with people that then have to work with other humans face to face in the sales function, you're dealing with customers on a face to face daily basis. I think there's a lot to be said for having that kind of level of interaction, and I think people feel much more able and also encouraged to share knowledge and best practice and anecdotal and all those other sort of maybe less tangible bits of information in a face-to-face environment. And you can't beat, we were just talking about it earlier, you can't beat physically touching, experiencing, driving, you know, actually being with the product or in a real life situation, whether it's driving it or charging it or touching it or understanding how the media system, whatever it is. You can learn certain things, you can learn the theory of a lot of it virtually, but you can't physically experience it unless you're in a live environment. I think that's why it still has a really, really firm place in the sort of overall mix of comms and training. Do you agree?
I do. I think face-to-face, feeling, touching, doing it is so important.
And you could see it actually straight after COVID. People were desperate to get back together. I remember the first automotive training event we did for one manufacturer, sort of beginning of 2021 it would have been. It should have been end of 20, but product got delayed. And the relief and the joy of people attending, in fact we did that one together, didn't we? People, the joy of them all being there and able to actually physically get back together, get back to sort of sharing that sort of just sharing the experience, and then getting you behind the wheel and touching and feeling and driving and all of those things as well. It was a massive milestone for a lot of people. Thanks, Michael, for today. Thank you for coming in. We're just doing a series of these sort of informal chats, really, aren't they, with our team of experts with whom we work across a number of different aspects of the industry. So it's great to be able to have you join us today to go through that, and hopefully our audience will just enjoy finding some little snippets of information or points of interest, or hearing it from the other side of the business as well. So thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.